The phenomenon that would later be classified by the Ordo Hereticus as the Great Annoyance began not with a blood-soaked tear in reality, but with a faint scent of lilac and entitlement. In the rusting, dripping underhive of Necromunda, amidst a particularly noisy firefight between the Orlok and Dalaka gangs, Karen materialized. She appeared in a shimmering bubble of psychic energy that popped with the dissatisfying sound of a flat soda. She stood, hands on her hips, her sensible walking shoes already sullied by the grime of the hive floor. Her blonde, immaculately coiffed bob haircut, a style unseen in the 41st millennium, seemed to repel the filth through sheer force of will. "Unbelievable," she declared to the universe at large. The nearby gangers who had paused their firefight to stare at the sudden appearance of this strangely dressed woman were momentarily stunned into silence. Absolutely unbelievable. I was told this was an express checkout. A hulking Orlok ganger, his face a mess of scars and cybernetic implants, cautiously approached her. "What in the Emperor's name are you?" he growled, hefting his autogun. Karen fixed him with a stare that could curdle milk at 50 paces. "Excuse me? Is that how you greet a paying customer? I have been waiting for an eternity, and now I have to deal with this? I want to speak to your manager. Now." The word manager echoed in the cavernous space, not as a sound, but as a psychic shockwave. The Orlok ganger felt a sudden, inexplicable urge to apologize for the state of his gang's hideout. His cybernetic eye twitched. His comrade, a man who had once wrestled a hive squid into submission, felt a deep-seated shame about his scuffed boots. The Dalake gangers, hidden in the shadows, felt a collective wave of existential dread. Was their clandestine operation up to code? Were their spy holes properly cleaned? The urge to fight had completely evaporated, replaced by a nagging anxiety that they were somehow letting the side down. My manager?" the Orlok stammered. I am the manager of this firefight." "Oh, are you now?" Karen's voice dripped with a condescending sweetness that was more terrifying than any battle cry. "Well, manager, your performance has been subpar. The lighting in here is atrocious, the acoustics are a nightmare, and this is clearly a hostile work environment. I will be filing a formal complaint." She produced a small, data slate-like object from her handbag and began tapping at it with a stylus. The psychic pressure intensified. The Orlok ganger felt a bead of sweat trickle down his spine. He had faced down Ambots, stared into the abyss of the hive bottom, and even survived a run-in with a Palanite enforcer. But this was a new kind of terror. "Look, lady," he pleaded, we're just trying to kill each other." "And you're doing a terrible job of it," Karen sniffed. "No efficiency, no passion. It's like you don't even want to be here. Now I am on a very tight schedule, and I demand to be compensated for this inconvenience. And for the love of all that is holy, take me to someone who is actually in charge." The psychic command was undeniable. The Orlok ganger, against all his training and instincts, found himself nodding. "Yes, ma'am," he said, his voice a hoarse whisper. "Right this way, ma'am." The firefight was forgotten. The Dalak gangers slunk back into the shadows, not in tactical retreat, but in shame. The Orloks, their bravado shattered, holstered their weapons and escorted Karen through the labyrinthine corridors of the Underhive, their minds reeling from the encounter with this new, incomprehensible power. A power that didn't seek to kill or corrupt, but to complain. A power that would soon make the Chaos Gods themselves sit up and take notice. The age of the Karen had begun. The Orlok ganger, a man named Grok who had a reputation for being able to headbutt his way through a bulkhead, led Karen to his boss, a grizzled warlord known only as the Baron. The Baron was in the middle of counting his weekly tithe of archaeotech and ill-gotten gains when Grok, looking thoroughly defeated, ushered Karen into his throne room, a rusty, repurposed sanitation tank. "Baron," Grok mumbled, this lady, she wants to speak to the manager." The Baron, a mountain of muscle and scar tissue, looked Karen up and down. He had seen strange things in the Underhive, but this was a new level of weird. "I am the Baron," he boomed. "I am the manager of this entire sector. What is the meaning of this intrusion?" Karen was unimpressed. Finally, someone with a semblance of authority. Now, Baron, I have a list of complaints. Firstly, your so-called express checkout was a chaotic death trap. Secondly, the ambiance of this establishment is, frankly, depressing. And thirdly, she leaned in, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper, I saw a rat the size of a cyber mastiff in the hallway. This is a clear health code violation. The Baron blinked. The psychic aura of Karen's entitlement washed over him. He suddenly felt self-conscious about the pile of skulls he was using as a footrest. Were they properly sanitized? This is the Underhive, he grumbled, trying to regain his composure. There are always rats. Not on my watch, Karen declared. A good manager would have dealt with this. A good manager would have provided adequate customer service. A good manager, she paused for dramatic effect, would have at least offered me a complimentary beverage for my troubles. The Baron, a man who had once ripped the spine out of a rival ganger for looking at him funny, found himself on the back foot. He felt an overwhelming urge to please her, to make her complaints go away. I can have someone get you some recycled water, he offered lamely. Too little, too late, Karen sniffed. I am taking my business elsewhere. And I will be sure to leave a scathing review on the local Voxnet. Now, I am done with you. I demand to speak to your superior, the real person in charge of this entire mess. The Baron, feeling a migraine coming on, saw an opportunity to be rid of this terrifying woman. He knew just the person, an individual so steeped in the soul-crushing bureaucracy of the Imperium that surely he could handle her. You want to speak to my superior? He said with a malicious grin. Fine. I'll take you to the Adeptus Administratum. Let's see how you like dealing with them. The journey to the upper hive was a trial for all involved. Karen complained about the rickety elevators, the poor ventilation, and the general lack of customer-facing synergy. The hive gangers who escorted her found their weapons jamming, their cybernetics glitching, and their morale plummeting. They arrived at the Administratum sector, a place of towering gray buildings and endless queues. For the first time, a flicker of something akin to contentment crossed Karen's face. Now this, she said with a satisfied nod, is a bureaucracy I can work with. She was brought before a senior adept, a man named Tiborius, whose entire life had been dedicated to the glorious art of paperwork. He sat behind a desk piled high with data slates and vellum scrolls, his face a mask of weary indifference. I am here to file a complaint, Karen announced, her voice echoing in the cavernous hall. Tiborius sighed, a sound like dust settling on a forgotten tomb. Please fill out forms 37B, 42 Gamma, and 11 Epsilon in triplicate. You will then be assigned a waiting number, and your complaint will be processed in the order it was received. Estimated waiting time is 3 standard Terran years. Karen's eyes narrowed. I don't think you understand. I don't wait. I am the one who makes others wait. I want to speak to your manager, now. The psychic force of her demand hit Tiborius like a physical blow. The data slates on his desk flickered and died. The ink in his quills spontaneously dried up. The servitors in the room began to chant, in monotone unison, Your call is important to us. Please hold. Tiborius clutched his head, his mind reeling. He had faced down petitioners, dealt with rebellious scribes, and even survived an audit from the Ordo Malleus. But this was a new level of administrative horror. He looked at Karen, her face a mask of implacable resolve. He knew with a certainty that chilled him to his cybernetically enhanced core that he was out of his depth. This was a problem for a higher authority. A much, much higher authority. Very well, he said, his voice trembling. I will take you to the planetary governor. But be warned, he is not as accommodating as I am. We'll see about that, Karen said with a tight smile. I've dealt with my fair share of unhelpful middle management. They all learned to accommodate me in the end. As she was led away, Tiborius collapsed onto his desk, a broken man. The Imperium had faced down threats from Xenos, heretics, and demons, but it was beginning to look like its greatest challenge would come not from a roaring horde, but from a single determined woman with a complaint to file. And she was just getting started. Planetary Governor Vostrovan Gilder VI was a man who believed he was the very model of imperial authority. His palace, perched atop the primary spire of Necromunda, was a testament to gaudy excess, filled with gilded servitors, holographic portraits of himself, and carpets woven from the fur of some extinct fluffy quadruped. He was therefore entirely unprepared for the psychic onslaught of pure, unadulterated complaint that was about to breach his sanctum. Karen marched into the throne room, her sensible shoes clicking with indignant purpose on the polished marble. She barely glanced at the towering arched ceilings or the servitor choir humming hymns to the emperor. Her focus was entirely on the man seated on the ridiculously oversized throne. "Right," she began, not waiting for an introduction. "Let's start with the decor. It is profoundly tacky. Gold plating everything doesn't scream prestige. It screams, I have more thrones than taste. And your guards." She gestured dismissively at two magnificent custodian wannabes in gleaming carapace armor. "Their pauldrons are uneven. It's distracting." Governor Gilder, who had been in the middle of a grandiloquent speech he had prepared for this unusual petitioner, found the words dying in his throat. His guards, men who had not flinched while suppressing hive quakes and riots, suddenly felt an intense wave of professional shame and began subtly trying to adjust their armor. "Furthermore," Karen continued, her voice rising in pitch, "I was made to wait for 7 minutes in an antechamber with no reading material and a distinct draft. Do you have any idea how valuable my time is? You are addressing the supreme ruler of this world." Gilder finally managed to sputter, rising from his throne. He lapsed into the high Gothic he reserved for moments of extreme gravitas. "Per imperatoris decretum, state your purpose or face judgment." Karen stared at him blankly for a moment, then rolled her eyes with such force it created a minor psychic ripple. "Oh, for goodness sake, stop talking like you're in a bad opera. Just speak low Gothic like a normal person. Honestly, the pretentiousness. It's no wonder nothing gets done around here." The governor felt a vain throb in his temple. The very air in the room seemed to curdle with her disapproval. The servo skulls that normally flitted about recording his every glorious utterance began to hover anxiously, their optical lenses blinking. One of them emitted a soft, synthesized voice. "Your satisfaction is our priority. How would you rate your experience with the governor today on a scale of 1 to 10? Gilder swatted the skull away in a panic. "Who programmed that? Get it out of here." "Don't blame the staff for your own managerial failings," Karen chided. "It's a sign of a weak leader. Now, I have been passed from one incompetent middle manager to another, all the way up your ridiculous, inefficient hierarchy. I was promised an express checkout, and instead I've received nothing but firefights, poor hygiene, and now, this display of theatrical nonsense. I am officially taking my complaint to the next level. I demand to speak with your manager." The governor's mind, already reeling from the psychic assault of her pedantic criticisms, finally fractured. Who was his manager? The Sector Lord? The High Lords of Terra? The God Emperor himself? The sheer bureaucratic nightmare of the concept was too much to bear. There is no one else," he cried in desperation. "This is it. I am the final authority." "Not anymore," Karen said, tapping her foot impatiently. "Clearly you are not equipped to handle this situation. There must be someone who deals with special cases, someone who can actually solve a problem instead of just sitting on a tacky chair. A troubleshooter, a specialist." And as she spoke the words, the governor's panic coalesced into a single, terrible idea. There was indeed an organization that dealt with special cases. An organization that could make anyone, or anything, disappear. An organization that would surely be immune to this woman's madness. "Very well," he said, a cruel, desperate light in his eyes. "You wish to speak with a true authority of the Imperium. So be it. I shall summon an inquisitor. Let's see you complain to the Ordo Hereticus." A collective gasp went through the throne room. To summon the Inquisition was a final, desperate act, like setting your own house on fire to deal with a spider. But as they looked at Karen, who was now examining a tapestry and muttering about its uneven stitching, they knew it was the only way. Inquisitor Malachi Thorn of the Ordo Hereticus arrived like a stormfront of grim certainty. He was a tall, gaunt man in black power armor, his face a roadmap of scars, each one a testament to a faith that had been tested by the vilest horrors of the galaxy. He entered the governor's palace not with an entourage, but alone, for his presence was authority enough. He found Karen in the governor's private dining hall, where she was lecturing a terrified chef servitor on the proper way to fold a napkin. "I am Inquisitor Thorn," he announced, his voice a low growl that had made demon princes quail. "I am here to pass judgment on the anomalous warp entity designated Karen." Karen turned, giving him a slow up-and-down appraisal. "Well, it's about time. Your subordinate, the governor, was completely useless. And frankly, this whole judgment business is very unprofessional. We're here to solve a problem, not to be dramatic." Thorn ignored her, his psyker-attuned senses reaching out to probe her mind, to find the demonic influence, the Xenos taint, the heretical rot within. He expected to find a maelstrom of chaos, a labyrinth of deceit. Instead, he found a psychic wall of beige paint, the faint sound of hold music, and an overwhelming, soul-crushing certainty that the return policy was only valid for 30 days, and she did not have the receipt. The psychic feedback was so jarring he actually took a step back. "Your mind is an anomaly," he stated, his composure slightly rattled. "Of course it is," Karen said. "It's the mind of a customer who has been wronged. Now, before we proceed, I'd like to see your credentials. That little eye symbol on your necklace." She pointed at his inquisitorial rosette. "Is it supposed to be tilted like that? It looks cheap. I've seen better craftsmanship on novelty keychains." The Inquisitor, a man who had resisted the psychic seductions of a Slaaneshi demonette and the mind-shattering paradoxes of a Tsientian sorcerer, felt a flicker of pure, unadulterated rage. He fought it down. "This is a holy seal of my office. Its design is sanctified." "It looks tacky," Karen repeated, the words striking him with the force of a psychic bolt. "Are you sure you're a real Inquisitor? I don't want to waste my time with another temp." Realizing his usual methods of terror and psychic domination were failing, Thorn switched tactics. He signaled to an acolyte, who brought forth a magos of the Adeptus Mechanicus. Magos biologist Scraxia was more machine than woman, her flesh face replaced by a brass plate of whirring lenses and sensor arrays. "Magos," Thorn ordered. "Analyze this being. Determine its nature and origin." The Magos approached Karen, her mechadendrites whirring and clicking as they deployed a battery of scanners. She emitted a stream of binary cant, a prayer to the Omnissiah for clear data. "Oh, for heaven's sake, enunciate," Karen snapped. "I can't understand a word you're mumbling. It's just common courtesy to speak clearly. And could you stop that clicking? It's incredibly distracting." The Magos' lenses focused on Karen, and her logic engines began to process the data. The readings were impossible. There was no detectable warp signature, yet her psychic output was off the scale. Her biological makeup was baseline human, yet her presence was causing localized reality to fray around the edges. A servitor in the corner suddenly short-circuited, its last words being a repeated offer for an extended warranty. Magos Scraxia directed a beam of pure data at Karen, an analytical tool that could catalog a subject down to the molecular level. It hit Karen and was instantly reflected, corrupted into a stream of petty complaints and bad reviews. The Magos' internal cogitators began to smoke. Paradox warnings flashed across her vision. Error. Subject insists on speaking to the manager of physics. Logic fault. The customer is always right, even when in violation of 17 axioms of universal law. The Magos let out a screech of static and staggered back. "The data is illogical," she buzzed, her voice box distorting. "This entity operates on a form of meta-reality powered by grievance. It is not of the warp as we know it. It is a self-perpetuating complaint engine. The machine spirit is offended. It gives me a rating of needs improvement." Inquisitor Thorn felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature of the room. This was beyond heresy. This was beyond Xenos contamination. This was a fundamental threat to the very order of the universe. There was only one place that could possibly deal with this. "We are taking this entity to Terra," he declared, his voice grim. "The High Lords must see this for themselves. May the Emperor have mercy on our souls." "Terra?" Karen's ears perked up. "Is that head office?" Finally. I was beginning to think I'd never get anywhere. The journey to the heart of the Imperium was an ordeal that would be whispered about in the Voidfarers' mess halls for millennia. Karen complained that the Geller Field's hum was not conducive to a restful sleep. She argued with the navigator of their vessel, claiming he was peeking through his third eye and that it was a gross invasion of her privacy. She forced the ship's master of the Vox to re-record every single ship-wide announcement because his tone was unwelcoming and frankly a little bit threatening. The grizzled Void captain was last seen in his quarters, weeping softly into a copy of the Imperial Infantryman's uplifting primer. When they finally arrived in the Sol system, the sheer overwhelming majesty of Terra, the throne world, did nothing to impress her. "The traffic is appalling," she declared, looking at the millions of ships in orbit. "And I can't see a single decent parking spot. This is a logistical nightmare." She was escorted, under the tightest security the Imperium could muster, to the Senatorum Imperialis. She marched into the chamber of the High Lords of Terra, the 12 most powerful individuals in the galaxy, and was not in the least bit intimidated. "All right, let's get this over with," she announced to the stunned council. "Who's in charge here? I have a list." And then she began. She unleashed the full, accumulated, weaponized power of her Carinus upon the masters of mankind. The Fabricator General of Mars's logic engines crashed as she complained about planned obsolescence in STC designs. The Grand Master of the Officio Assassinorum felt a cold sweat as she critiqued his organization's lack of transparent customer feedback channels. The Lord Commander of the Imperial Guard was berated for the unflattering cut of the standard issue flak armor. The psychic pressure was immense. It was the concentrated essence of every bad haircut, every cold meal sent back to the kitchen, every demand to see a manager in the history of a forgotten humanity. The very foundations of the Imperial Palace trembled, and in the Immaterium, something noticed. The 4 great powers of chaos turned their attention away from their eternal game. They felt this new, raw, terrifying psychic energy. It was not the rage of Khorne, the scheming of Tzeentch, the decay of Nurgle, or the excess of Slaanesh. It was something worse, something mundane, something beige. The psychic energy of Karen's ultimate complaint, her demand to speak to the Emperor himself, finally reached a critical mass. Reality in the chamber of the High Lords tore open, but it wasn't a swirling vortex of purple and pink. It was a perfectly rectangular rift that looked suspiciously like an automatic door at a supermarket. It opened with a polite but insistent ding. "About time," Karen sniffed, and stepped through. As she crossed the threshold into the warp, her mortal form dissolved, and the psychic energy she commanded was given form. A new Chaos God was born, not of blood or magic, but of pure, unadulterated entitlement. Karen, the 5th God, the final manager, the one who complains. Her realm in the warp was not a garden of pestilence or a palace of pleasure, but an infinite soul-destroying office complex with flickering fluorescent lights, uncomfortable chairs, and the constant maddening sound of hold music. Her greater demons were the regional managers, beings of immense power who could bore their opponents to death with quarterly reports. Her lesser demons were the customer service representatives, who attacked not with claws, but with passive-aggressive platitudes, and the unyielding refusal to deviate from the script. Back on Terra, the High Lords were left in stunned silence. The rift had closed, but the damage was done. Across the galaxy, the great annoyance began. Cults of Karen sprang up. They didn't perform sacrifices. They formed homeowners associations and filed noise complaints against their neighbors. Their champions didn't wield demon swords. They wielded clipboards and wrote scathing 1-star reviews. Their psychic powers manifested as the uncanny ability to be wrong, yet win every argument, leaving their foes feeling vaguely guilty and unsure of themselves. The Imperium had a new enemy. An enemy that couldn't be fought with bolters and chainswords. An enemy that sought not to destroy the galaxy, but to reorganize it into a more efficient, yet soul-crushingly mediocre state. The battle for the soul of mankind had gained a new, terrifying player. For in the grim darkness of the far future, there is not only war, there is also management. And she would like a word.